Now, before I introduce our next guest, I'd like to give you some bio, okay? This person has 25 years in the video game industry, specializing in multiplayer strategy games. His hit titles include Conflict of Nations World War II, or III, I should say, with over 30 million installs. Also Battlestar Galactica Online with more than 25 million users. He has worked in over 60 games, or on over 60 games, and collaborated with top licensors like Universal Studios and Warner Brothers. As a leader, he excels in team building and project management. Now part of the Stillfront Group, this person focuses on innovative gaming experiences, driving the Supremacy franchise and exploring new technologies. Ladies and gentlemen, he is the founder and co-CEO of Dorado Games, Nick Porsche. Porsche. Thank you. Nice to meet you, Nick.
Thank you. Likewise. My God. What an introduction. I think I'm more humble than what this sounded like, honestly. Fantastic to see you all here in Malta today. I'm humbled. I'm standing up here for the first time giving a keynote, so bear with me if I'm a bit nervous, maybe. I'm also speaking to you out of 15 years of experience here in Malta. I've been one of the veterans of making games here in Malta. I think we were one of the first companies to set up shop here long time ago. And then I founded Dorado Games some over 10 years ago. So we just had our 10-year anniversary this year. I have a whole bunch of people sitting over here from the company, so that's great. It's wonderful to see them here tonight. So I just have to get used to the monitors here and see if I can actually read what I want to say. Yep, works? Okay, good. So in the course of my career, I've worked on a lot of games. It sounds tremendous with 50, 60 games under the belt, but in reality, of course, that was a lot publishing, so I didn't concept those games. What I've been doing actually over the last 15 years is working on massively multiplayer games based here from Malta. In the beginning, that was Battlestar Galactica Online that I developed together with a lot of talent with the guys from Universal Studios, Big Point, and a few others. And after we founded Dorado Games, I started working on the Supremacy franchise, which is culminating with our latest release, Conflict of Nations World War III. These games are forever games. Battlestar was turned off, but is still actively played with a fan server, which I'm extremely proud of, because it's sort of the knighthood. If you're designing a game that then is taken up by fans and continuously played, that's fantastic. What better than that? Conflict of Nations is going from strength to strength. We just had our best year ever. So it's not letting down. We are in our 8th year. The franchise itself is in its 14th or 15th year, or even longer, probably longer. So we're talking about long time spans. I think that's pretty much everything you need to know about myself. Let's talk about the more important aspect, actually, the team. So the team essentially is ultimately important when it comes to creating great games. And the first challenge, of course, we faced when setting up here as two guys on an island was, okay, how do we secure funding? How do we secure and actually attract talent? Attracting talent today is an issue that we all face. We all have the same issue, no matter if we're in London, in Berlin, or here in Malta. With Malta having the real benefit of being a sunshine island, so a lot of people are attracted to come here. We also did some changes in our studio, and we have decided to work only 4 days a week, which is a blessing, honestly. And it has attracted quite a few people to us that otherwise probably would have gone somewhere else. So this binds talent, but it also attracts talent. So this is kind of how we solved this. It's very loud out there, isn't it? For us, it is ultimately important that we have a passion for games. So one of the first things that I realized when I came into this industry was that, interestingly enough, quite a few people working with me didn't really cherish games. They were not that deeply involved in games. And for us, it is the first thing that we really ask for is that someone is absolutely passionate about what we're doing. If there's no passion, there is no job. It's that simple, right? And with this in mind, we have now created a team of 50 people here in Malta that are working in an open office, open in the sense of being able to work from home, work in the office, work from a cafe, work from wherever they want, from the beach if need be, but working together, collaborating, and becoming a very, very close-knit group of people. We have thus actually worked on creating a franchise that is 80 million registered players, and in the last 12 months, the peak, which was in last winter in January, was nearly 3 million active players in that month. So that is quite a strong number, and it shows us that we're on the right track. We've done stuff right. When we set out to create Conflict of Nations and also the other previous games, of course, we didn't have in mind that this would last forever. You can be happy if your game lasts over the launch phase, and then you have to drive it to success. But to anticipate something like a 10-year time span for a game or 20-year time span for a game, that is something that is not common. It needs a special setup. We have to create a mindset to allow to kind of thrive in this environment. We're also talking a live game environment, and it needs a little bit of thinking outside of the box often enough. It's not the typical sort of development and release and development and release. It's an ongoing thing. It's 24/7, and having a forever game, of course, comes with a set of challenges, but also with some benefits. As Manuel Bronstein, who is the CPO of Roblox, once said, a forever game is the holy grail. And I really concur. If, as a company, you can create a forever game, well, then you've got a constant source of income, you've got a constant source of new ideas that you can implement, and if you don't screw it up, you're in business for a long, long time. So, I've been video gaming for a long, long time. We just mentioned Pong. Yeah, that's about the time frame. But more importantly, when we were all sort of playing games such as StarCraft and Age of Empires, I'm sure quite a few of you have done that yourself back in the olden days at LAN sessions. One of the questions that always came up amongst us at later in the evening was like, how awesome would this be to be able to play this type of game instead of with 2 or 3 people, but with like 100 or 1,000, right? And then we usually opened a beer and leaned back and said like, nah, it isn't possible. We cannot do this. This is a pipe dream. There were so many issues with it, right? But in fact, 20 years on from this, or 25 years on from this, if you look at the RTS, the real-time strategy games created today, they haven't really moved on. They haven't really evolved, right? And this is an issue. I mean, we see this as very big studios that are trying to kind of rekindle the fire of the olden days, but they just cannot really manage to do that. And in parts, this has to do with them actually looking and orienting themselves a very, clicks per second, twitchy type gameplay, all esports oriented, which is of course important, we know that. But to really go further and beyond that and to take it into a realm of, as I said, 100 players or 1,000 or even more, you have to think a little bit outside of the box. And that's actually what we did. So when we set out with a genre a long time ago, we were developing into a niche. And we did this by particularly pairing some board game mechanics, which we knew well from games such as Diplomacy, if anyone knows them, with RTS mechanics. And then taking the speed dial, and instead of cranking it up, we turned it down really low and slow, to the point where some can say it's like watching paint dry. But in other cases, it's like reading a book. It's a long, protracted type of playing the game and investing your time into the game. And this investment, paired with a game that has 100 or even more players on a map, is what you could call a Souls-like of strategy gaming. Some call it not fast but frustrating, right? That's nice. Not fast but frustrating. You wouldn't actually kind of market this, but interestingly enough, sort of like with Souls-like games, there is a market for this. We discovered this. We didn't really believe it in the beginning, but we did now. And out of this, we eventually built up the franchise. I already mentioned that in order to succeed with this, you have to go really deep. And in our industry, especially now for the last few years, the situation has really changed, right? Deep isn't necessarily the trend anymore, especially not on mobile games. It's about fast iteration, quick releases, reskins. We've seen that quite a bit. We've tried that ourselves, actually, and failed. And this is, of course, all driven by the new marketing. When I started with box product and premium games in the olden days, there wasn't any user acquisition channels. But nowadays, everything is controlled by the algorithm. So the algorithm tells you, OK, we need low-poly, funny models, and we need very casual, clicky gameplay. And that is true, because that is an immediate way to interact with your potential audience, right? And it makes sense. The only problem is that games all start looking alike, and everyone is kind of copying from everyone, and in the end, you end up with a lot of Me Too products. And you also follow the same marketing patterns, and everyone is kind of used to the same, and it doesn't. And so, for us, this just didn't work. We also weren't that interested, because initially we launched in the browser and on Steam. So we took our time, and eventually we ended up really trying to do the same things as the trend, right? We tried to make it easier for the players. We tuned down. We created safe zones, and we tried to ensure that the players were always happy, especially in the beginning, right? It's a common thing, right? You want to come into the game, and you want to be guided, and you want to kind of not be instantaneously pounced upon. But we failed. It didn't work. The numbers were terrible, and we couldn't market the games. So we had to actually go back to basics and do the opposite, right? We had to actually sit down and go through the whole game again, and it was really painful, because we had just launched half a year ago, and the numbers were getting actually not better, but they were getting worse. And so we had to cancel everything, had to cancel our summer vacation, and we sat down and we just crunched into the numbers and started turning the game around. We added a lot more complexity, we added a lot more hardcoreness. We dropped the players right into the deep end, where it absolutely hurt. And we followed what Sid Meier once called the 30-30-30 rule, right? So we took what we had, which is sort of the 100% at that moment. We chunked it up. We left 30% untouched. We changed 30% and we added another 30% on top to give it that more complexity, to add multi-layered air defense systems and these things. And it actually worked. We didn't expect it at first. Again, one of those learnings. But we were able to turn the trend around. And in fact, we went deep and we didn't have to go home, because that was the sword that was hanging over us at that moment. We knew that if we wouldn't buck the trend, we wouldn't have a company much longer. So coming from that, and then looking at massively multiplayer gaming in the 21st century, because I've been playing massively multiplayer games since way before that, and it hurt my telephone bill a lot back then. Today, especially on mobile devices, if we're talking any type of massively multiplayer game, we're talking usually asynchronous, 4X type gameplay, city builders that have an ease of entry kind of type of onboarding, persistent servers that are running at least for months, if not years. But we wiped all of this off the table. We went in and we just shoved it all away and said, no, we cannot, this isn't the way. We're not an Evony clone or a Chinese multiplayer type of game. This isn't who we are. We are deep and we are massively and we are PvP right from the beginning. This is where the players are. At least for us, this is where the niche is. And we created a game that lasts 45 days, sometimes played for 180, 200 days. Again, something that we did not expect. We just recently actually analyzed again the curve of investment of players into our matches, and our players are investing into each individual match for 70 days. And there is nothing to be gained. So a paying player in our game invests into a match that then comes to an end and his investment is gone. There is no meta that he can take away. There's nothing that he is invested into in the sense of retaining his monetary investment. So you would expect this to actually lead to a situation where it just ejects. But strangely enough, the opposite is the case. We have a lot of players that are actually staying for years, often. And to kind of give you an idea what we're talking about in our type of games, we're talking about 400 different types of actual, real military units that are on this planet right now. Sometimes we can actually see them in action in the news. We're talking about ordering a tank battalion across Europe, and it takes 2 weeks for it to cross all of the countries. So this is very much real. If I'm reinforcing my units from the United States into the UK, it can take that plane 6 to 7 hours travel distance, which is in fact actually pretty much real time if you think about it. This level of reality and realism and complexity engages the player, of course, a very specific type of player, and leads to a high level of retention. And it's also something that isn't provided by other games. So now, this is an interesting aspect, because now we're talking about coming from a niche, creating a subgenre or a genre, right? Because if nobody else is actually doing this, and we're profitable and people are loving it, then we're touching something. This kind of plays out in a way that you must imagine that like at 3 in the morning, our players are lining up their units along the border, and they're invading the enemy with drones and attack helicopters flying low below the radar. Not sure if the opponent, the enemy, is actually sleeping or awake. That's that's why he's doing this at 3 o'clock in the morning, although he has to maybe go to school or go to work the next day. And it is this level of investment that brings up the adrenaline that we players all know. I mean, especially now that we have Talon here, it's all about the adrenaline of playing and of the match. And we know this. Every player, I think, knows this. This level of adrenaline that kicks in at the moment that we are absolutely 100% committed into the game. It can be a shooter, it can be a strategy game, it can be a Souls-like and an adventure. It doesn't really matter, but it is this thing, this level of emotional impact that we all crave, and we are actually satisfying it. We are providing this to our players. So I've talked a lot about the game and about what we have done there and how we've layered the mechanics and how complex this stuff is and how hardcore. But one thing that we're asked time and time again is how is it actually making war games? Aren't we ashamed? Isn't it a problem for us? And my typical answer is no, I'm not ashamed at all. I'm a Cold War kid myself. I grew up a stone throw from the border. The military has been in my family history for a long, long time. We're all slightly traumatized from the recent events. And to showcase that we are not the guys that are waging war, we are actually the guys that are providing solutions in some part. I just want to reiterate a small story that happened, I think, in 2018. So on that morning, I open my mailbox and I find an email from a father who is writing me an email about how he lost connection to his family and his son because he was a soldier in Afghanistan. And to understand, especially in the beginning, our game, and has been over the years, been played a lot by military personnel, active and retired. So he wrote me this story, and he tells me that he's a retired veteran from Afghanistan, and he's suffering from PTSD, and he had real issues getting back into society. And he lost his family over this, and he just couldn't adjust. And it was with our game that he actually managed to touch base again with some of his military friends. And he established a brotherhood that he had lost in the military, and he established it in the game. He formed an alliance, or clans. They got together, and he started healing. And he brought his son in, and they started playing together. And he kind of, through this, through play, through gaming, he got his son to understand his mindset better and what he had gone through in the days of war. For me, this is a very emotional thing. It's something we did not expect at all. And it shows the power of gaming. Way beyond anything that we anticipated, way beyond anything that we actually designed. And it's certainly not the norm, but it is a wonderful thing, and it stands against all of the toxicity that we always read about and that we hear about, because this is exactly the opposite of this. It's deeply human. Another important aspect in all of this is, of course, that we have fans who are extremely committed. And we built our games around this. Our first hire, I hope, is Jacques here? No, he's not here, okay. Jacques was our first hire in the company, and he was, and still is, our community manager. Right? This is how important community is to us. We built the game around the community, not the community around the game. That was one of our cornerstones. And just recently, about a year ago or two, we hired one of the most prolific fans that we worked with, actually on a volunteer basis, as our main, one of our main designers, and he's mainly caring about the balancing. He's deeply knowledgeable in all of our games, and he's been with us for 14 years. as a player, and now he's a professional in our company, and he's fantastic. And this for us is actually one of the best moments that we can actually level up with our fans. Let's talk a little bit about money, because we also have to secure cash. And one of the challenges, of course, of a modern game is securing or making enough money to support ourselves, secure the burn rate, and hopefully be profitable one day, right? We all know that. So when we launched, not our game, but other games, we found that as soon as you have any type of payment in the game, as a free-to-play game, or even worse, as a premium game, if you have a gold market or something, you will get rated for that. People will see you as either free-to-play, monetizing, or pay-to-win in the worst case. Let's talk about that. And this pay-to-win stigma that we've all kind of gotten used to in a way, and that we're all trying to evade and avoid, we found we can't. There is no way, because we're working towards a niche, right? We're not Fortnite. We're not. We cannot work with vanity items. We don't have pink tanks in our game. So how do we do this? And we actually turned it around. We gave it a twist, and we made pay-to-win one of our features, which at first sounds a bit ridiculous, but listen to this. So remember the 3 a.m. lineup story that I just told about players going in, and what if I told you that one of the elements that as an invested player, and as a hardcore strategy player that I am, is simulating the real fog of war. And what I mean by that, of course, is no plan withstands first impact with the enemy. And often enough in modern strategy games, this isn't adhered to. In modern strategy games, chance is reduced to a minimum. Most of it is very foreseeable. It's clicks per second. It's all skill-based. In this case, if I'm sending in my units, not only am I interested if this guy's awake or not, but I'm also interested if he may potentially be a paying player. If he's a paying player, I may face much stronger adversity than I anticipated. And this can lead to very interesting situations. From a strategy perspective, as a player, I am now challenged because I, of course, have my plan of action and I go in, but it may be completely thwarted by what he's doing. At that moment, I have to quickly shift. I have to bring in some of my allies, or I have to ally with other players against him. That's one strategy. Another one is, being better than him, because often enough we know that paying players aren't always the best players. And if everything breaks and this guy is really the wallet warrior that we expect him to be maybe, then there's always the option for me to shift tack, go into another match, and continue playing there. No harm done. With our heavy payer base of less than 1%, this isn't a big issue. The chances that you will bump into the same guy or another guy of that level is very minimal. So this has guaranteed us a very strong source of income over all the years, and it's the backbone. We are not hiding. We're not trying to be what we are not. We're standing to it, and we're giving the players options. And interestingly enough, through a very close collaboration with the community, we've managed to actually have them defend us, which is fantastic. Last topic for tonight, or for this morning actually, sorry, is the transition over to mobile, because everything that we talked about was about PC, browser, Steam, and that's all nice and good, but in comparison, everything pales to what we achieved on mobile, because we transitioned from there to mobile, and we did this, again, in the most core fashion. We didn't do what everyone else was doing. We didn't dim down, we didn't slim down, we didn't cut corners, we didn't cut features. We did exactly the opposite. We took the complex game that it is on PC and actually just packaged it and released it on mobile. And to be very honest, in the beginning we were absolutely not convinced that this would work at all. Maybe as a companion app at max. Little did we know. So today, 80% of our revenue is generated mobile. 20% of our revenue approximately is generated on PC. The PC players are 3 times as valuable as the mobile players, and there is a transition, of course. Mobile is our entry funnel, but we've clearly proven that there is a case for extremely hardcore PvP strategy on mobile that doesn't cut corners, and it doesn't fluff up, and we don't hide. So the way that we did this, of course, is not instantaneous success, but we actually iterated, and we're still iterating to this day. We're changing UI, and we're changing everything again, but we can because we're profitable. And now, with Dr. Strangelove behind me and a maniacal laugh, we can all come and then read this out loud with a German accent, which I will not do for you now. Or do you want to hear me go into this? Yes? We have now become the masters of our own niche, our own genre. Thank you.